I understood we were made from tiny specks, tiny atoms, smaller than any light we could see. Inside these atoms were what we called nuclei. They were the core of what we knew ourselves to be. There was a machine we used that could show us the reality of what we were. Magnetic resonance imaging, they called it. We were to lie down, naked, in the machine, staying perfectly still. The machine would then create its own magnetic field around us, and it would send the frequency out into that magnetic field, knocking our nuclei out of place. I had thought that it would be an odd feeling, lying still in the machine, but I was made to understand that we felt nothing in the process. As our nuclei realigned, they would somehow transmit a new signal back to the machine. The signal was then measured and converted back into gray pixels as an image of what we were. This new signal had a similar frequency to VHF, the kind we could catch with an antenna, like the kind we might have found on an old TV, 2 telescoping rods, bunny ears. I watched Nora on the screen. She reached her hand out so that Miriam would hand her her new bunny. She took it and held it to her cheek. She walked in a circle and shouted, "Bunny, bunny, bunny, bunny." Miriam tried to capture her to change her diaper, but she escaped. She ran naked across the room. She banged her fist on the door, demanding for it to be opened. Miriam followed her down the hall, holding the cell phone so I could see. Nora ran into my office to Mouse's cat tree. She reached her hand upward and took the scoop from the shelf. She pulled down his bag of treats. Mouse waited patiently as Nora scooped some treats and dropped them into his bowl. She laughed as he ate them. She patted him and then ran away. My mom came downstairs. I showed her the screen. She said hi to Nora and Miriam. We let them go so that Miriam could get Nora ready for daycare. My mom showed me her phone, how she couldn't connect it to the printer. She was trying to print her knitting patterns. She said it was hopeless to try and fix it. It was impossible to make it work. There was no use even bothering with it. I took the phone and went upstairs. I pressed the little screen on the printer, connected the phone to it. I brought the phone back down to my mom. I told her to try it again. It worked. She was very excited when she saw that. She printed the pattern. She went upstairs and got the pages and brought them back down. The pattern was cut off for some reason. I adjusted the setting and printed it off again. My dad came downstairs. His hair was all messed up. He said he'd slept better than the night before, that he was better off having quit the sleeping pills he'd been taking. Cold turkey, he kept saying. He said he was feeling pretty well. He'd slept for about 4 hours and then was up for a while and then fell asleep again for another few hours. He made himself a bowl of cereal and came back to the couch to eat it. We went for a walk after breakfast. The door at the coffee shop was boarded up. The woman working there said they'd been robbed. Someone smashed the glass and stole the till. While I waited for our coffees, my dad went to the convenience store to buy a lottery ticket. On the way to the hospital, I looked at the paper that had all the information for my dad's appointment. Alberta Health Services, Holy Cross Center, Rehabilitation Oncology, 2nd West Green Elevators. My dad pointed out all the new construction sites on the way there. We sat in traffic and watched through the window as they repaved the road. We made our way through the hospital and found where we were supposed to be. We sat and waited, my mom next to my dad. He went on his phone. She read her e-reader. I sat on the ledge across from them, looking down at a giant gong in the middle of the courtyard a few hundred feet below us. Eventually, we were called in and guided down a hallway to a small room. The three of us sat along the wall, the therapist across from my dad. She asked him how things were going. He said they were very good, except for the sleeping pills he'd been taking, but he was done with them now. They talked about a chart exercise she'd given him before, something about combining numbers and letters. My dad said he was able to do it, but it had become too easy because he'd memorized them all. She asked my mom and I how he'd been doing. I explained that sometimes he said different numbers than he wrote. He would write the numbers that he meant, but he would say different ones, and that he usually mixed up denominations. Sometimes he could see he needed to correct himself, but other times he didn't seem to notice. The therapist talked about the connection between memory and speech, how it can be improved with practice. She took a deck of cards. When she would turn a card over, my dad was to say its number and its suit without error. If he made a mistake, he had to start again. He asked if there were any jokers in the mix. She said that there were. She began, he went through it. 4 hearts, 8 hearts, queen, club. He told her he'd been reading stories out loud most days, from an exercise book that my sister had given him. It depended on what was going on. On Thursday, he went with the kids, he said, so he couldn't read that day. He told her he did a lot of walking, that yesterday had been very nice out, that he did 80,000 steps. She looked at me, understanding what I'd said before. 8,000, I said. That's right, 8,000, my dad said. She asked him if there were any board games at home that he would play, that some of them could help his speech. He said he didn't like games like that. He said that when computers first started out, he played games, when they were simple. Solitaire mostly, but now it wasn't the same. He said he would do the cards, though. She took him through another exercise, having him read a recipe. She said that the longer the sequence, the harder it would be to recall. That would help to break up the information. If he made an error, she would cut him off, and they would start again. Good old-fashioned pancakes. Original recipe, years. She got him to start again. Yields, she said. Years. Yields. Yeards. Yields. Yeeds. Yields. Yeeds. He didn't start from the beginning, like she said. Instead, he moved on. 8 servings. Ingredients. 1.5 cups all-purpose flour. 3 tablespoons butter melted. 1 large egg. She stopped him. 1 large egg. I've seen this recipe before, he said. She tried to get him to start again. Instead, he talked about the sleeping pills. I could see her confusion by the jump in logic. He's usually able to talk better in the mornings, I said. It's harder when he's tired. He told her that he was getting better now, that he quit taking the sleeping pills. She said that it would be good to practice in the mornings. He changed the subject. He took his cell phone and showed her a picture of my niece dressed as a skunk on Halloween. My skunk, he said to her, and laughed. He showed her a picture of the award he'd gotten from the Dental Association. He talked to her about the construction in our neighborhood, all of the traffic that came along with it. He told her about the Chinese food restaurant that we went to, that they knew him by name there. When we came home, my dad sat on the couch, and I sat in the chair by the window. I thought of being back in Toronto. I would think about this time and try to write about it, and try to remember all the details exactly as they were. My dad messaged someone on his phone. Habitation. Rehab? I asked him. Yes. R-E-B. Habilitation. Start with R-E, I said. Habit. R-E, I said. H-E. R. R, he typed. E. R-E. R-E-H. R-E-H. Rehabilitation, he said. Rehabilitation oncology. That's it, I said. After lunch, my mom and I went to Costco again. My dad stayed back. He wasn't quite feeling up to it. On the drive there, we talked about how the next day would go. After they dropped me off at the airport, they would go back to the hospital for my dad to have his next MRI. He would lie perfectly still while the machine would create a magnetic field around him. It would send the frequency out into that magnetic field, knocking his nuclei out of place. They would then somehow realign and transmit a new signal back that would be measured and converted into gray pixels as an image of the reality of what was there. And I would be gone again. I would be on a plane, going back to the place that I lived. As we passed by the reservoir, I saw that the water hadn't frozen yet. I imagined how it would look when it did, if I would be back by then, or if it would have already frozen and thawed by the time I was. I looked at the water, imagining what it would be, somehow unable to see the reality of what it was.